Grant Cardone is one of those genius guru guys who can tell you how to lead the perfect life and be as rich as possible and all that good stuff. I think he's mostly finance. He doesn't get as much into the relationship red pill sort of stuff, but he is pretty much just as annoying to me. And just to give you a taste, if you're not super familiar, here's a minute or so of the video that he promotes when you first land on his YouTube channel.
I'm getting ready to go in and do a meeting for my sales team. They're on the phone every day. They think I'm going in there to talk about sales. I'm going in there to talk about money, because if you don't have your money right, if you're not thinking about money correctly, guess what? You're never going to make a sale. You're never going to push through the objective.
Hell yeah. It's not about sales. It's about money.
And the barriers and the hang-ups and everything that goes on in sales. It's a disappointing job. It's a tough job. It's a crazy job. It's like being an actor, okay? Why would anybody be an actor after they go on 100 auditions? Nobody ever picks them. They're like, I'm done. The only reason you want to do that is because you want to be a superstar. Okay, guys, so this is what I want to do. I want to talk to you about money today, not sales. All right.
It's so corny that all of these people were just waiting around for whenever you were going to show up, or are you right on schedule here? Very seems just very set up and fake the way that that he walks in
If you
here.
don't get the money right, you're not going to make the sale, period, okay? $1 million, $1 million. Peter Thiel,
Billion.
$2.8 billion Peter Thiel said the single-digit millionaire, you know what that means? Guy with $1 million, or two, or three.
Oh, a single digit. Okay. At first I was like, what is he talking about? Just a single digit millionaire? Like, but what? What? But then he's like one or two or three or four. And then I started picking up the pattern. So good thing for that.
Or four, cannot even provide his family with proper defense, legal defense in America. Much less emergencies, divorces, major lawsuits, business lawsuits.
I mean, I think plenty of people afford emergencies and divorces. People get through life for the more, not to say those things don't suck, they can't really screw things up. But yeah. So anyway, this guy is a douche, very hateable, and he initiated a lawsuit against another guy that was talking shit about him. And while they were doing the whole like discovery, evidence searching sort of stuff, some very interesting stuff came out about Grant Cardone and how he runs his business. I'll just give you a quick overview of the lawsuit. In January 2024, Grant Cardone, a businessman and real estate mogul, filed a $100 million defamation lawsuit against John Legere, the former CEO of T-Mobile. The lawsuit stems from alleged false and inflammatory comments made by Legere against Cardone during a heated public exchange on the social media platform Clubhouse in 2023 and separately on Twitter. And this is at least a decent chunk of that exchange. This guy, this like Scientology critique guy, reacted to it, and that was the only copy I could find online. But
John,
I cut him out when he's talking here for the most
you
part.
are the biggest bullshit artist on the planet. Okay,
John,
so
at
I'll
least-
finish
go
my
ahead.
statement. So Grant Cardone, who talks about being a recovering addict, and if you look at his posts, they are constantly him holding wine and whiskey and everything else. So Grant, are you a recovering addict or are you just a drunk?
I had a drug problem. I never had a drinking problem.
Hey Grant, how much of the world sees a bifurcation between a drug issue and an alcohol issue?
What do you know about addiction?
I know quite a bit.
It's a very fancy way to ask, what's the difference, Grant?
I've never had a problem with alcohol.
You talk about my life and my recovery and the whole deal, but you're out drinking.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with
Well,
wine,
I think
John.
the world might have a problem with your story, Grant.
Why are you trying to diminish everybody in the room?
No, just you, Grant, because you're a fucking
why are
con
you-
man. I'll say this on this room right now. I believe that in the next year, Grant Cardone will be found guilty of fraud. I believe that Grant Cardone will be found guilty of fraud, and I want nothing to do with it.
John, do you know of anybody that I have been fraudulent to?
like this might sound like sort of petty, just bickering between millionaires, but unironically, the stuff that that this Legere guy was saying to him here is uh, cited in the lawsuit. Like these sorts of things are cited, and I think one of them was because that actually was a sort of specific claim. You're going to be found guilty of fraud in a year or whatever. But I mean, you're gonna sue somebody for that? Like he's talking shit. I don't think that's allowed. But I don't. I also don't have lawyer money, so maybe it is.
I think you're a fake. Somebody that says I used to be an addict, and I think you're fake. That's my
Okay,
opinion.
but thank you. But you've never done business with me. You've never given
And
me
I wouldn't
anything.
do
We've never
business
done
with you,
anything.
Grant. You've been begging me to do business with you for 5 years, and I won't.
He's just getting trounced by Legere right now. Cardone is stammering when he starts talking, and then he gets a couple words in, and Legere's just like, "No, I wasn't done talking about how you suck."
I don't think I've ever offered you any money to do anything or any partnership.
By the way, he's not a
Yep.
billionaire.
Yep.
He doesn't have
Go
close
ahead,
to $1
John.
billion, and he is
How do you know, John?
somebody.
How do you know?
Somebody
How do you know
here.
that?
He's
How do you know that,
somebody
John?
who is self-promoting. And if
How do
you
you know
go
that,
to
John?
the world, go to the world of CNBC, go to CNN, go to the world, ask about Grant Cardone. He doesn't exist.
How do you know what I'm worth, John?
How do I know what you're spending?
His vocabulary is great. He's just all of that to say nobody knows about you, Grant. You're just a YouTuber.
Under the radar to live
How do
your
you know what I'm spending?
lifestyle.
How do you know where my money comes from? How do you don't know anything about me financially? Just admit that, John.
So how
You don't
much you
know.
paying to the church, Grant?
John, what, John? What does that matter?
How much you paying to the church?
John? What do you
The
know about me
church know?
financially? You just said you just made a bunch of claims about
I don't
what
know.
I am.
Hey, what I know, Grant, is that you say all the time you're a billionaire, that you have 4 billion. So, in real estate, do you? Are you a billionaire?
John, what do you know about my
Here's
finances?
your chance. Here's your chance, Grant. Are
I
you
don't
a
need.
billionaire?
A very, very straightforward question. And from the sound of it, Grant has said before that he's a billionaire. So odd that he couldn't just say yes.
I don't need a
Yes
chance
or no?
with you. You're the
Are
one
you
that's
a
coming in
billionaire?
here.
Tell the group. Hey, Grant, your profile says you're a billionaire. Are you a
John,
billionaire?
John, I'm not going to even answer your questions right now.
Are you? Are you close?
Until you answer some of mine, I'm not going to answer yours. Okay?
Let the group know that a very simple statement is Grant Cardone a billionaire? Yes or no? He won't answer.
Well, it'd be hard for me to state that. I don't know how I could state that publicly and it not be true without having banks come back and say, bro, what are you doing?
So you know what the answer is, Grant? You're not.
John,
Yeah, exactly. That's way too convoluted of an answer for a yes or no question.
you ever
Assets
see my
versus
financials?
debt.
Just
With
for
a
the
market
room,
at 7% mortgage rates, how you doing?
John, I'm doing great. How do you know?
Like, it's crazy. He is genuinely stammering against this guy who's just constantly interrupting him, talking over him. He sounds so much more confident. Like, obviously you can't convict anybody off of something like this, but I'm convinced. I'm sold. Whatever Legere says is true, and everything Grant says is wrong.
No,
You
because
say
John-
all the time you're a billionaire. You say it all the time, but you're not, and you won't say
How
it.
do you know that, John?
It's good. Yes or no? Grant Cardone, are you a billionaire?
John, how do you know?
There
Have
you
you ever
go.
seen
Come
my
on, that
finances?
says it all it means, Grant.
Okay, let me ask you
You're
this
a
question,
big
John.
talker.
How
You're
can
a
I
big
claim-
talker. Let everybody know the answer was not yes.
John, did you say in this room that I am fraudulently using funds
Oh, here you go.
from accredited
Here
and
we go. Blah,
non-accredited
blah,
investors?
blah, blah, blah. Here we go, Grant. How
did you say
stupid
that?
do you think I am?
I think you said that, John. Did you
Said
mean
what,
that?
Grant? What
That
did I
I'm-
say, Grant? Do you want to
Like, that's such a childish, just blah, 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 but he's owning them. It's working. Just blah, 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 blah. Are you stupid?
ask your lawyer to ask the question more specifically?
I'm asking
Just
you.
have him write it down. Have him
do
write
you-
it down and send it to me.
Do you believe that I have been fraudulent with my investors?
You know what, Grant? I believe
No,
you're a
you
con
don't believe
man.
that. You don't believe
I
that.
believe you are a con man of the highest order.
And you understand my business depends on my reputation and on
There
presenting
you
to the
go.
public.
Okay. This is con man number 101. Try to find a little legal issue. Grant, I believe you're a con man.
Yeah, I think he's saying that Grant's trying to plant the seed for defamation there by saying, "Oh, are you saying something that would damage my reputation? Well, you having knowledge that I make money based on my reputation? And if so, could you please sign here?" Like, come on, man.
That's my personal belief. Hey, Grant, are
That's
you
right.
gonna sick the?
You've
Are
never
you
done
gonna
this.
sick the
And John,
church? Are you gonna sick the church on me now? Because I know the church has a big issue with people that are anti.
Talking about the Church of Scientology, because Grant is a Scientologist.
Big players like you. Hey, and are you not the biggest contributor to the church, or no? Is or is
why do you attack?
is the Top Gun guy
Why,
still ahead of you?
why do you attack people's religion, man? I don't understand.
It's not religion.
It's like, that's a Tom Cruise. He's also a very prominent Scientologist.
It's part of your. It's the whole spiel. I do understand that the church will attack those that attack you. Is this part of that?
John, man, bro, you got to get some help, pal. I'm surprised that you would tell hundreds of people in a public room that I steal investors' money when in fact we delivered $22 million in cash this year and almost $400 million over the last 4 years.
And my opinion is you're a fraud.
Yeah. And what about the fraud? What about the I stole money from investors?
My opinion is, Grant, is you're a fucking fraud. Go ahead. Tell the church.
But Grant is fishing so hard to get him to say something that would be easier to nail him down for in court, but he's not going for it. It's a very pussy move, Grant, to be so litigious.
Tell the church to come get me, Grant. And Grant, how do you think that's going to play in your big opinion about yourself and what people think about you if you're going to go and have this conversation? He said I'm a fraud. So if you're that tenuous, you're a fraud, Grant.
Okay, thank you, man.
Can't wait to see you leave now. Go ahead. Take your tail between your legs and head out the door.
Oh my goodness. Like that's rough. He got completely owned, Grant. I don't know what to tell you. But so here are a couple screenshots from legal documents related to the court case. I stole these from Scott Schaefer's video. I don't know where the actual legal document is, but go through a little bit of this because you get some very interesting information about how Grant runs his business. Pursuant to Florida rules of civil procedure, blah, blah, blah. Anything in here? Defendant seeks to issue a document subpoena to Susan Shyman, the former CFO of Cardone Capital, LLC, a company owned or controlled by Grant Cardone. So, not some random schmuck. It's somebody who would have information and knowledge about how the business is ran, specifically the finances if they're the CFO. As explained in greater detail below, plaintiff's objection is baseless and is interposed for the sole purpose of preventing defendant from discovering documents that are likely to sink in his defamation claims in this case. To illustrate, plaintiff claims that Legere's statements describing him as a fraud, effectively accusing him of criminal activity, were false, but Shyman was one of many sources that suggest Legere's statements were true. In fact, the thing is, if it's true, even if you didn't have proof at the time, if it's true, you can't get defamation. In fact, Shyman was allegedly recorded by law enforcement officials insisting that she did not want to go to prison in connection with her work for plaintiff and his companies and former Cardone Capital executives, including Shyman, revealed publicly that Cardone Capital tried to burn the place down by frantically destroying evidence so that law enforcement officials could not uncover wrongdoing by plaintiff and his companies. I mean, it's not a good sign. You're burning the paperwork and any evidence of what you've been doing as part of your business. Makes it seem like maybe your business isn't all that legit. Based on this evidence, commentators have opined that if Grant Cardone avoids prison, it will be a miracle. Accordingly, Cardone's persistent efforts to prevent discovery into potential unlawful conduct by him and his companies should be rejected because proof of that wrongdoing is critical to establishing Legere's statements that Cardone is a con man and fraud were not false. So yeah, I mean, it means it's just crazy because all of this is only coming out because Grant Cardone had too much of an ego and he got his feelings hurt and he wanted to sue Legere for defamation. And so now this comes out because he got his feelings hurt. More pursuant to whatever. Moves for an order barring plaintiff Grant Cardone's harassing subpoenas deuces Tecum to Mr. Legere's daughter and his former spouse. Mr. Cardone's subpoenas are a shameful abuse of this court's subpoena power because he knows neither Miss Legere nor Miss Camey have any information that is relevant to the claims or defenses. So he's just filing spurious subpoenas and, just to gum up the works, keep them tied up, probably cost them money. Instead, Mr. Cardone has issued these subpoenas solely to try and harass and intimidate Mr. Legere and his family only because Mr. Legere has begun to establish his defenses in this case. Mr. Cardone's outrageous conduct should be halted in its tracks by quashing the subpoenas or entering a protective order prohibiting Mr. Cardone from deposing Mr. Legere's family members without any basis to believe they have any relevant information. Pursuant to more things, defendant John Legere moves this court for an order overruling plaintiff Grant Cardone's frivolous objections to Mr. Legere's notices of intent to serve document subpoenas to witnesses that Mr. Cardone himself identified as having relevant information. Because this is just the latest episode of Mr. Cardone abusing the discovery process, this court should reject Mr. Cardone's objections and impose costs for wasting the court's and Mr. Legere's time and resources. So it sounds like even though at one point Grant said that these people would be the types of people to have insightful information, now he's trying to object to these people being heard in the court or their testimony being brought up, or I don't know exactly, but along those lines. Mr. Cardone claims that he suffered $100 million in damages after Mr. Legere supposedly described him as a conman, fraud, and bullshit artist. According to Mr. Cardone, those damages stem from thousands of investors or prospective investors contacting him about Mr. Legere's statements. Do you really believe that thousands of investors contacted him about the T-Mobile CEO saying you're a bullshit artist? You're not a real billionaire? If anything, it would be because you refused to answer the question. That was the most damning thing to you in that call, more so than anything John Legere said about you. And 2, losing television shows and appearances. Mr. Legere served interrogatories requesting Mr. Cardone to identify the investors or prospective investors that contacted him about statements made by John Legere. I don't think I had more of that. But we got one more here. Second, Mr. Cardone's objection is contradicted by his complaint because he alleges that every statement by Mr. Legere identified in the complaint is false. While Mr. Cardone's counsel has been forced to admit in the course of arguments before this court that at least some of Mr. Legere's statements are true, he refuses to identify every statement quoted in the complaint that he now believes is true. So he's kind of in this weird thing where he doesn't actually want to say which is which because it would look bad. Then we all know, oh, what was he lying about? What was the truth? He'd be admitting too much. So he just has to say, hey, some of it. So I don't want to get into it. I know I brought you to court, but actually I don't want to get into it. The court should reject Mr. Cardone's attempt to stall discovery by leveraging the confusion created by his vague complaint. Third, Mr. Cardone's objection is frivolous because it tries to block the investor or prospective investor's subpoenas in their entirety, but objects only to the request discussed above. Therefore, Mr. Cardone's argument cannot sustain his overbroad objection. Mr. Cardone's objections to Fox News and A&E subpoenas should be overruled. Said, yeah, I think he's saying those were interviews that he lost because of this, and it's just like, all right, bro, you're reaching. These TV interviews, that's what you're going for. But yeah, very funny just to see this blow up in his face, because this is something that absolutely did not have to happen. He stepped on the rake and got hit in the face with this stuff. So curious to see what all comes out because of this, because basically panicking and frantically destroying evidence of your wrongdoings makes it seem like your wrongdoings were especially wrong. So hopefully he gets screwed, because I can't stand this Grant guy. I just, any of these guru guys are the worst.